It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Be very scared of the IRS. You need to pay your taxes. So this sounds like common sense.
Right.
But let's kind of go through some of these celebrities that have fallen into this trap. Al Capone. And here's why I want to do the show. I'm going to give you some nuggets of information,
Okay.
so that you get entertained, and then we're going to teach, hopefully provide some teachable moments. But Al Capone, remember, this is the guy known as Scarface. They tried to catch him on everything. They couldn't do it. This guy was so slick. He had never had a bank account. He only dealt in cash transactions,
Right.
so couldn't create a paper trail. He also created layers of separation. Everybody's heard that and attributes Al Capone to the St. Valentine's Day massacre, where 7 members of a rival gang were basically slaughtered
Right.
by people associated with Al Capone that were dressed up like police officers.
Yep.
But you would think, okay, so did Al get in trouble for those murders? No, because you know where he was? He was down in his Florida beach house with a note from his doctor saying he had to be on bed rest. He already had his alibi worked out. He was even out of the state when he did some of these horrible things. So what did the government do to get old crazy Al Capone? Taxes. Tax evasion is what took Al Capone down. They got him a 10-year sentence in federal prison, then 1 extra year in Chicago, so 11 years. But he didn't even make that. He died 7 years into his sentence. So that's when you go to Alcatraz, you can tour, and they'll talk about all the cool things that went down.
Even for those who think they are above the law,
Yep.
they're not above taxes. Because it seems like I've heard somewhere there's only 2 things that are certain, and I don't remember the other one, but I remember taxes.
You mean death and taxes. You know it. And then so next is, how could we Blade, Passenger 57. I mean, there's so many. Wesley Snipes. So from 1999 to 2004, Wesley Snipes made around $40 million. Wow. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money over a 5-year span.
So he made $40 million, and he decided not to pay the $7 million of taxes on it.
I like what you put in here in parentheses. I don't know if this was your words or someone else's. You put tax protester and anti-tax advocate.
No, that's what he claimed. That was his defense.
So I'm a tax protester. I'm not going to pay.
Yeah, somebody had gotten in Wesley's ear and said, you know what? The way the tax law is written, it's actually a voluntary thing. You don't really have to pay taxes.
Okay.
And so let's face it, here's what Wesley's thinking. I made $40 million. These cats think I owe them $7 million. But this guy seems smart with this whole tax protester
Right.
pitch. Maybe I get to keep that $7 million. Maybe taxes are voluntary. That's probably what Wesley was thinking. I will save you a lot of trouble. Pay your taxes, because it's not voluntary. You have to pay your taxes. So in 2008, Wesley Snipes was convicted of 3 misdemeanor counts of failing to file tax returns, and he served almost 3 years in prison.
That's the part that I find so surprising. It's not just that if you don't pay your taxes, the government's going to say, oh, pay us some taxes, pay us some penalties. You can actually do some real jail time from not paying your taxes.
No, you definitely have to pay your taxes. And we could have added so many other people. Willie Nelson. There's so many. Lionel Richie.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of people I look up to that have gotten into trouble with taxes. And here's a funny one to close it out. Bo, you brought this video to my attention. If you haven't looked at this video, you ought to go do it on YouTube. There's a video called "How I Became the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air" with Will Smith.
That's right.
And I love this because it walks you through. It's kind of a motivational type thing, because he talks about how he was up, and then he was down, he was broke, and then he kind of became the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. So go check out that video. But here's what I like, and this is the quote I wrote down. Before I was in trouble with Uncle Phil, I was in trouble with Uncle Sam. And this is what he said. He said he spent all of his money and did not pay the IRS. And his quote was, and I'm going to modify this to take out the one cuss word.
Make it a little more PG.
But he said, it wasn't like I was not trying to avoid paying taxes. I was like, oh, man, they need their money. So, and I think that happens to a lot of people. Well, you don't have to just be a celebrity who all of a sudden finds fame and starts having money coming in. I see this with a lot of small business owners too, or even salesmen that get big bonuses. All of a sudden this money shows up, and then the taxes aren't paid on it. And a few months goes by, because remember, your taxes are from January to December 31st, but you don't have to pay. Your taxes aren't due until April. So a few months go by, and then people go, oh man, I don't have the money to pay that tax bill. That's a horrible thing. And this is another thing that I thought was hilarious, and this is funny but educational. Will Smith said, famous and broke don't work well together. He goes, being famous, people recognize who you are, but they recognize you while they're sitting next to you on the bus.
Not the place you want to be when you're a celebrity.
Definitely pay attention to your taxes, because as we hear it, without the similarity between all this is the government gets their money.
That's
so
right.
make sure you stay up on that. So here's what to know. Make sure your taxes are on solid ground. Everything, and this is a quote I got from a tax partner I had when I worked in public accounting, everything's deductible until you get caught. Do you catch what is said there?
I get it.
Because I think a lot of people think when you file your tax return and then, say the 4 weeks later when the direct deposit or the refund check shows up in the mail, you're like, it worked. I guess the government accepted that I filed that return and took all those crazy deductions. That does not mean you got away with it, because remember, the government has 3 years. If you did everything on the up and up, they have 3 years to come back after you. But if they find and they prove that there's fraud, it's unlimited. They can go back forever on your taxes.
That's right.
So everything's deductible until you get caught. So definitely stay on solid ground. And you've heard me tell the story. I have seen people. I've had the opportunity to represent people in front of the IRS.
We were just talking about this before the show.
I have, but I've always, and the advice I give people is if you ever get a full audit, I'm not talking about the letter situation. I'm talking about if they ever actually want to do an in-person audit with you, do not represent yourself. Have some type of advocate, a CPA, an attorney, or somebody represent you, because I have seen grown people cry from representing themselves in IRS audits. And I don't want to go too deep into it, but the simple fact is, well, if you represent yourself, the IRS can mushroom. They can ask you about a rental property deduction that you took, but then on the spot, they can mushroom the audit into another portion of your tax return, and then even go into previous tax years of that 3-year period. It's a really scary situation. If you have an advocate or somebody on your behalf, there's kind of some parameters, and there's some limits.
You just have a team in place.
Yeah, if you have a team. So pay attention to that. Keep good records. Plan for taxes.
This is the big one, and this is the one, because most folks are sitting out there. I would imagine most folks don't fall into the Wesley Snipes category of being a tax protester.
Yep.
But we see this all the time with someone who maybe started a small business and they had some success and they earned some income throughout the year. Or maybe they were an independent contractor, did an odd job. Well, when you're an independent contractor, you don't have taxes withheld like you do in a normal paycheck.
Yep.
You still have to pay taxes on that. I actually have some friends who won a poker tournament and actually won a big, decent chunk of money in that poker tournament. Didn't know they had to pay taxes on that at the end of the year.
Organized poker
organized.
tournament, not something in a neighborhood.
This wasn't a neighborhood thing. This is like a big tournament put on. And I didn't realize that they had to pay taxes on that come tax time. And, fortunately, it all worked out. But you have to know when you have those sources of income, you're going to have to pay tax on that. So something you need to be aware of.
All these people doing side hustles. There's a lot of you out there doing side hustles. Here's a big clue for you. If they make you fill out either a W-9 form or just ask you for your Social Security number, that means Uncle's going to know. There's your clue. When they make you, whenever you're doing the side hustle or you get a vendor and they ask you for your tax ID or Social Security number, that's a clue Uncle's going to know. So pay your taxes.